Welcome to the Evolution Show. I'm Johan Landgren. Today I have a very inspiring guest for you on the show, the American rocket scientist, inventor, and Guinness record holder Douglas Malewicki. As an astronautical and aeronautical engineer, Malewicki has been involved in everything from the Apollo Saturn V Man to the Moon program, the B-2 stealth bomber, submarine rockets, and he has even made a real Tyranausarus transformer that could eat cars and spit fire. But what really stands out is Malewicki's dedication to sustainable transport solutions, which we'll talk more about in the next episode. And if you want inspiration to keep healthy and keep in shape, listen in today, because how about this? In 2020, at the age of 80 years, Douglas Malewicki ran more than 3,200 miles. Yes, you heard right, more than 5,000 kilometers in 1 year. And Douglas is also the creator behind this really cool card game called Nuclear War. So stick around to stay ahead of the curve and stay electric. This is the Evolution Show. Welcome to the Evolution Show, Douglas Malewicki. How's things in Southern California?
Oh my golly, I went for a walk this morning and this is February and it was like spring weather gorgeous.
Nice. Yeah, when I was preparing this conversation, I read that you have a pretty extensive Wikipedia page, and according to this page, it says that you're actually the inspiration for the one-eyed monster Mike that became famous in the Pixar's and Disney popular film Monsters, Inc. So obviously my first question is, are you a monster dog?
My other friend, when we talk on the phone, calls Hi Monster Doug, but that's because of the Robosaurus. We really don't know about the Mike Wazowski from that Monsters, Inc. movie. Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah.
This is from a card game I made for my daughter a long time ago. And here he is. She was probably 5 or 6. Can you see that?
Yeah, there it is.
Does he look familiar?
Yeah, definitely.
Except
Yeah.
I have a tongue, a big hanging tongue, and big bloodshot eyes in my version of what I call the one-eyed glorp. And I think on my webpage there's a picture of the costume I made. I filled up a big balloon and then paper mache'd it all over to make this big sphere, and then cut out the bottom, put this big screen eye in there, and she had a lot of fun with that for a couple years. With the big goofy arms. Then the paper mache started collapsing, so we had a bonfire one day in the cul-de-sac. And then if you read the story, supposedly the TV show Pee-wee Herman had a character that was afterwards, and then another few years was Mike Wazowski in that Monsters, Inc. So we don't know where it came from.
Let's say that it's you actually. You mean the story is as you interpret it, of course. So
correct.
Yeah, but for people who don't know you, I was trying to make a short summary because there's so much. You've been involved in so many projects over the years, and I really encourage people to check out your Wikipedia page. But I'll make a short summary introduction for people who don't know you. And if we start with your background, you're an engineer and you're a rocket scientist, and you have been working with rockets for submarines as well as the Apollo Saturn V program for NASA. And you even have equations named after you. And you hold 2 Guinness records from 1980 and 1981, where you created 2 different gasoline and diesel vehicles for the longest trip traveled at the time in terms of miles per gallon. And you are the inventor of many other amazing things. For example, you have invented this really funny game called the Nuclear War game, and you are also, which you created during your college years, as I understood it, in 1965. And you're also in super good shape. You have written a book, you're an author, and this book, Fit at 75. And in 2020, you ran a total of 3,204 miles in 1 year. And yes, your motto is always thinking and always having fun, which I think is really inspirational, something to keep in mind every morning when you wake up. So, but let's start from the beginning. Could you share perhaps a little bit about your background and early career? What led you to become an engineer, for example?
Wow. Oh, elementary school. They made a little pamphlet yearbook. And then all of a sudden, this was back in Chicago, they had a 25th anniversary. They reprinted it. And I was shocked because my hobby was model airplanes. And even then, I wanted to become an aeronautical engineer. I was like, wow, I really wanted to do this stuff. I had an uncle who flew airplanes in World War II, and I just thought that was the greatest. My dad used to take me out to like Midway Airport, look at the planes taking off and and my uncle Lefty the bookie, he had to go pick up his wife across Lake Michigan, and he decided, here's young Dougie, and he paid and let me fly in an airplane all the way across Lake Michigan with him. In a DC-3, you get in and it's tilted. You have to walk up like a ramp to get to your seat. That's really, really long time ago.
Yeah. But eventually, I mean, now we're jumping ahead, of course, but eventually you ended up, I mean, there were many steps, obviously, before you ended up at NASA. But could you perhaps share a little bit, what did you do at the NASA program?
Okay, the company I work for was one of, 400 different subcontractors. It was called North American Space and Information Systems Division, and it was famous. It was part of a little airport. And in World War II, they created the 90-day wonder, the P-51 Mustang, from a drawing to a flying machine. And now they were building only the command module and everything related to that, like the launch escape system. Other divisions, like Grumman was making the lunar lander model. I forget which division of North American was making the S2 stage. Different companies all over the planet, 400,000 people or something worked on that project. I was not working directly for NASA. But anyway, I worked on the launch escape system, which was never used, and that lifted that conical shape with the 3 astronauts in it away from the booster if the booster exploded. And they actually had Convair building a little solid rocket for that one, just to take it up to speed into what's called max Q, and then they would abort and see what happened. And the first time they did that, it came down like a long lawn dart with the cone in the back and this front structure pointing down, popped the parachutes, and they ripped off. So I got pretty heavily involved with, they call them canards, at the very front of the rocket that popped out to start this thing tumbling a few times and then become stable heat shield first. And that worked. That was a lot of fun.
So I must ask you then, because you've made this game as well, and there's the rocket, part of the rocket that are actually, the nuclear.
Yeah, that is Super Germ. And you don't want to get that card because you lose 25 million of your popular. It's a crazy game. It is now 55 years old. Yeah. But first of all, I worked for Lockheed on the Polaris, which is those submarine-launched missiles. Okay, and that's where I invented it. But back in that era, anything you invented was owned by the company. So I had to submit it to the patent people, and they said, oh, this is kind of cool. And so they went to some of the big game companies, and none of them really wanted to do anything with it. So I got the rights. But by then, I was already working for North American Aviation Space and Information Systems on Apollo, and I found a really cool artist, and he did all the artwork for the game, and I spent the money to get it in production. Yeah. That was in 1965. It's now in its 55th years and still making me, I get a royalty $200-400 a month after all those years. Unbelievable.
Yeah. and this was, I would say, basically in the middle of the Cold War. So, but even today, it's really up to date. I mean, this is something you could play today as well. I think it's we can talk more about that, but it's a fantastic and really cool game, board game.
Initially, all the peaceniks hated us, but once they learned how it worked, they said, "Oh, this helps teaches peace." Because 2 out of 3 times you play it, everybody loses. Makes it funny. You have to have, you start with, maybe 75 or 100 million people, but to be a winner, because people have final retaliation and there's chain reactions, all kind of crap going on. You have to have 1 million population left to be declared a winner. And is that really winning a nuclear war,
Yeah. It reminds me of the classic movie, Dr. Strangelove. I guess you've seen with Peter Sellers There was a game company in Houston, Texas, that would have a conference, and they invited me out like 3 different times. They had the Midnight Nuclear War tournament limited to 100 people, and I forgot, but for some goofy reason, I learned how to do wheelies with a wheelchair. So I always came dressed up like Dr. Strangelove with a glove on, and I would pass out good cards to here and there to nice people. It was funny, and it was costumes. Yeah. And just for people who don't know, basically the main conclusion in the movie is that nuclear war basically leads to mutual annihilation.
Correct.
Yeah, everybody loses. So yeah, but anyway, moving on. So okay, from your early career, you have focused on finding solutions also for sustainable transport. So not just, rocket people might think, rockets, that's just a cool thing, but going to moon and so on, but it's not very environmentally friendly. But you have in 1980, 1981. You and the team developed vehicles which led to the Guinness World Records, and that was very much. I think you will have to tell me more, but I guess it was it was a record that showed that you could go a very long distance with a very small or a very low consumption of fuel. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about these 2 vehicles and the Guinness records.
First of all, we had to come up with a name with this thing. I think it was at a bar drinking. We just gave up on creative names and called it the California Commuter, okay? It was street and freeway legal. I had to go to the DMV. They were skeptical. I was writing back and forth with the engineers up in Sacramento to make sure I was doing everything right. And I showed them the letter. They actually called that guy, that engineer, to verify that we knew what we were doing. So they put the VIN number on the chassis. And then they said, "Can we take pictures for our newsletter?" This is the California Highway Patrol office. Yeah. Anyway, the first record was, this is the same machine, but 2 different power plants. One was a modified Honda 90cc. And it was made more power and more efficiency. I had a specialist do that for me. And this thing accelerated good, because even with limited horsepower, the power to weight was great. So it was fine on the freeway. But we were holding, back then, the speed limit was 55. So we're holding that, and even 90-year-old grandpas were driving past us. No one was going 55. That's boring. And nowadays, speed limit's 65, and everyone's going 80. But anyway, so we drove that to San Francisco. We were in a big, conference. All the new automobiles on display. And then the next year, I got friends with the guy who published Mother Earth News. So he came out just to see what we had, and he donated a diesel engine, 350 cc's, that he had for their little project, which they didn't understand aerodynamics, but they were getting 129 miles per gallon, but only going about 40 miles an hour. I'm saying, if you're not going freeway speeds, forget it. So anyway, we got it. He sent it complimentary, but this thing was so big and heavy. A diesel, number one, is 20% more efficient. Because of this diesel, our car weighed 20% more. We used to have this cool P-51 Mustang scoop under the bottom. Well, now the engine stuck out the bottom. We still had good ground clearance. So we kind of lost the super efficiency. So we did a second run, Guinness record run with the Guinness people at the beginning and at the end at Las Vegas. And the first record was 157 miles per gallon all the way to Frisco. I forget how many gallons, it wasn't many. And then the second one to Las Vegas, we got 156 miles per gallon. But actually that was better in a way because we had to climb 6,700 feet of climbing in that route to get out to Las Vegas. We had a lot of fun with that toy. But no one wants to be in a little peanut mobile like that. Weighed, what did it weigh? 240 pounds. So with me in it, 400 pounds gross. And I'm looking across at truck axles. It's very reclined as I pass the trucks. Yeah.
But what you learned there, you used later on as well, because, or in other projects. I know that you've used your aerodynamic skills also to work on designs for different kinds of bikes. And in 1983, just a couple of years later, you were involved in a project that ended up on the front page of the famous tech magazine Scientific American. Can you tell us about that bike and the thinking behind it?
Oh, okay. The bike on the cover was actually the first bike, pedal bicycle, International Human Powered Vehicle Association, to break 55 miles an hour pedaling. Okay, it wasn't ours. But I did make one bike for my daughter, Michelle Marie Malewicki, which we called the mini micro missile that she laid prone in. And she did through the 200-meter timing traps, 26.92 miles an hour. There were, 29.62 miles an hour. I got that backwards. What I was thinking of was that there were 26, mostly adult males who built these streamlined vehicles for this same category. And she came in 16th out of the 26. So some guys who worked all year on these, their cool machines were beat by an 8-year-old girl. She then, oh my God, she held the outright woman's record for 3 years after that. And for about 30 years, held the junior class female record. 30 years before.
That's amazing.
So it was fun. And that was at the old Ontario Motor Speedway, which is now all homes. Just like in Downey, where the North American Space and Information was, it became Rockwell, then it became Boeing, and now it's a shopping center. All that historic stuff is gone.
But you've been working on bikes in different other projects as well. You were a chief engineer for an Olympic cyclist. And what did you learn from that experience? If you look at the design perhaps and the aerodynamics and yeah.
Okay, this is motor pace, where there's a vehicle and we had to build a special fairing on a Bonneville record machine that's gone like 300 miles an hour. And we had to build a fairing that kept the wind off of him. At the same time, we had to have tires capable of going, 150 plus miles an hour. And the whole bike, one of my innovations was to use a double reduction, because my other friend, Alan Abbott, Dr. Alan Abbott, he had the previous record, 138 miles average over a mile, miles an hour. So we're gearing this higher, and I'm saying, look at the size of Alan's sprocket. It's this big, and his back one is this big. It's bad efficiency because you're not getting a good chain wrap. How about a double reduction? And then John Howard, that's the Olympic cyclist you're talking about. He said, I don't know. So a week later, he was talking with Alan Abbott, Dr. Alan Abbott, who set the previous record. And Alan said, oh yeah, I wish I would have done that. Boom! All of a sudden, it was okay. And then I helped John. He also won the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii. So this is like 2 weeks afterwards, and we all went to Bonneville with all the equipment and all that ready to go, and it was flooded, so we couldn't do that. So we go out for a run. This is 2 weeks after Ironman. My buddy and him and what was his other name? Al Gross. We're out there running around on the salt flats, And after about 3 miles, John says, I can't go this slow. Yeah, and he just did that Ironman trial. That was funny. But anyway, it became 1985, the first time the salts were dry. So he averaged 152 point something miles an hour through a measured mile. So now, what you probably don't know, this is umpteen years later, two Septembers ago, his protege that he coached, he's the coach nowadays, he's kind of not as old as me, but he's not a young dude anymore. He coached Denise Mueller to multiple national champions of the USA. So he calls me one day and say, hey, Denise wants to break the record. You want to be the engineer again? I says, you're crazy. Some woman would get killed. You know, I'm not a one. He says, well, she's been racing cars for 5 years. I says, whoa. Okay, that sounds interesting. I want to meet her and all that. Now, John's record was taken by a fellow from the Netherlands, which a few years later. So here was 2 Septembers ago, and Denise is now the overall record holder. Can you imagine pedaling a bike at 183.9 miles an hour for a whole mile? And again, there's a vehicle blocking the wind. Oh, they also had a race car driver lady driving this crazy vehicle too. So this, that was a fun project.
Yeah.
She'll be in the record books for a long time. I did the analysis. If you're in a vacuum, but you could breathe on the Earth's surface, 1G, if you took away all the drag, you can barely go 200 miles an hour. And they have rolling resistance, and stuff like that. I did a crazy analysis for bicycles on the moon in the future. I have some cartoons of that in my book too.
That sounds.
Yeah, you can do a tenth of a horsepower all day long, or 2/10. No. Let's see. Or you can do 1 whole horsepower. On the Earth, you can do 30 miles for a couple of blocks, and you're done. A minute's worth. On the moon, if you went that fast, you'd be almost ready to go off in orbit. Just say that you had the rolling resistance, which would be a fifth less and no drag. That would be fun, man. Or you can make little custom road vehicles, and you're pedaling them if they're, say, on tracks to get from place A to place B with nice flexible spacesuits. You'd be going 2,000 miles an hour so easy you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, but okay, so if we move on, we'll come back to your running, because you're very much a running guy. That's going to be my follow-up question soon. But if you move from the 80s into the 90s, you started to work at a company called Skytran. And that's also basically how I got to know you. I met you during a conference 6 years ago when you were in Silicon Valley in Mountain View to talk about self-driving podcars. And we'll come back to what podcars really are. We can touch upon it a little bit, but we can talk more about it in the second part when you come back to talk about the future transport solutions, where podcars could be one of them. But could you tell us, you've been working at Skytran, so how do you look at self-driving electric transport solutions? Could you tell us a little bit, what is a podcar, and what is a podcar compared to self-driving cars, which people are talking about so much today?
Wow. Okay, that you have to back up a little bit. My mind was free. Let's see, middle of 1989, we started. I raised money. 89, year and a half, to build Crazy Robosaurus. But at that time, I was working on the B-2 Stealth bomber, and I had some pictures of I worked on a jet motorcycle dragster and this and that, and the John Howard 152 mile an hour bike, neat stuff. And one of the engineers that worked for me said, Doug, you should make a transformer. And the other guy says, yeah, it should breathe fire. And the other guy says, it should eat cars. And I go, wow, I could raise money for this. And I did. But it took a year and a half to build. Focus. And they should have spent another couple $100,000. What they were too cheap to put in, my partners, was a system to take care of jerk. In other words, you got all these hydraulic cylinders. When you see a person working a bobcat or a crane, they, just like a car, if you step on the brakes of your car and just leave your foot there, you jerk at the end. You haven't taken care of the rate of change of acceleration versus time. But that would have cost a couple $100,000, and the guys didn't want to do that. So they had to slow it down. It's not as exciting as a robot as a few pictures show, but it eats cars. I was on the cover of Wall Street Journal and ads by Parker Hannifin. We had almost 500,000 of product sponsorships on that one. But anyway, so the first show was in January of 1990 of the Robosaurus, and we kept that for 18 years. But the March of 1990 is when I invented not Skytran, I called it people pods in the beginning. Elevated personal transport, and I didn't even know about PRT or even podcars. And podcars, I don't like PRT because when they say rapid, they're talking 35, 40 miles an hour. That's not rapid. PRT is a very common word. And podcars is one of the problems. Everyone thinks there's got to be a car up in the air. You got to look at costs and what's the potential capacity for moving people in your city for a certain budget.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, but so that's where you worked for several years, and up until recently, we can say, at Skytran. So you designed, and we can talk about that later. But until recently, you were working as a consultant or working at Skytran.
They finally incorporated, raised money. Yes.
Yeah. But aside from a long career as a successful engineer, you're also a writer and a diligent runner. You sent me a Christmas letter recently, and I was amazed by all the stuff you've been doing lately. But a lot of pictures are where you're running everywhere. And it says in the letter that you ran around 3,200 miles last year, 2020. And if I may say that you're above 8 years old, it's nothing nowadays, but it's still to run that long. And I mean, for most people, it doesn't matter how young or old you are, to run that long. It's that far in a year. That's very impressive. But so I was just wondering, what's your secret recipe or sauce for keeping in shape and in good health as the years go by? I mean, it's yeah.
Good question. I think I'm doing all the things the experts talk about. My daughter, who races 100 miles an hour, she eats super, super carefully. We eat better, especially over the last 10 years. My wife has become much more fruits, veggies, and healthy stuff. We haven't been out for a steak in 15 years probably. So, a lot less of the red meat and things like that. And I have a good buddy with that lady, Karen. We've been married, it'll be 44 years in July. And we sleep good. What's the other one? There's other things that are important. And I get the exercise. And I'm very sad my gym closed because I finally gave up on them. They closed 3 times in the panic, and then they finally closed. And so now I'm building a little gym. I got a...
Yeah, and you showed me a picture that there's no excuse for just because there's no gym. You're doing your exercises anyway, and you can do a lot. You don't have to lift a lot of weight. You can do a lot of things even if you don't have, the equipment at home. You can,
Okay, I got to tell you one little story. Okay, the 2020, that January before the COVID hit, was our 11th annual Run the Year. We go to Black Star Canyon, about 3,000 feet of climbs. And by the time we finished, that year we did 20.20 miles. And one of the guys the next day gets hold of me and says, Doug, you should go to this website, runtheedge.com. You can sign up to Run the Year. I said, we just did that. He says, no, 2,020 miles. Oh, okay, let's both sign up. Well, I signed up and he didn't. All right. So then he's the same guy who, after I passed 2,020 miles in August 2nd, as I remember, I kept going. And then I think November 22nd, I hit 3,000, and then, 3,200 something, which is 5,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
And he nicknamed me Geezer Dougie Gump because of Forrest Gump. Just kept on going. So that's funny. But this year, I'm doing the same thing with another friend. I'll hit 500 miles before February is over.
Yeah,
But
it's
but
super
I'm going
inspirational,
so slow you wouldn't believe it. It's not like I'm any kind of a young racing stud, believe me.
Yeah.
But is that something you talk about in your book as well? I mean, running and keeping in shape and what you've learned through the years. Something if people are interested, they can check out your book as well. I'll put a link in the descriptions below. I think you can find it on Amazon, right? Or
Oh yeah, it's on Amazon. It's only an ebook.
Yeah.
I was going to show you one other book I got. What did I do with it? Hold on. I'll be
Yeah.
back in 3
No problem.
seconds. I had one out here. This is both an ebook
Yeah.
and a print book.
Yeah.
That both of
You
those
have to-
are
Yeah.
my granddaughter Sierra.
yeah, you have to say what it says because because of the picture it's mirrored. So if you say it's
I can read this. Clonies, more fun
Yeah.
than selfies.
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I'll put up a link as well. Yeah, it's a really great title. So okay, but let's move on. Where what's next for you aside from keeping in shape and all the project you're involved in? I read that you're actually brewing your own beer. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that as an end.
That was the kit. A Mr. Beer kit was a present from our daughter who lives in New Zealand and her husband Steve, Kimmy and Steve. And it took a year, but we finally took the time to do it, and I couldn't have done it without Karen because you really got to do clean stuff. And now, after I've been careful with it because it's how much I consume. I got one bottle left, but it's really 24 ounces. And then I want to give away the kit. It's too much work. I'm so busy. It's much easier to buy different brands of beer every month at Costco. But I'm going to pass the kit on to whoever wants to go through the cleaning stages and everything else. It takes a month.
Yeah, and it's very popular here in Sweden to make your own cider as well, from apples and so on. So that's actually something I'm looking into myself because we have 3 apple trees. So that's something you can do as well. But do you have any other inventions or ideas you're working on right now that you would like to share for people who are interested?
2 or 3. One I can't share, which is the latest.
Classified.
Super classified. Yeah, I got to file a bunch of provisional patents. The others, I don't know. I don't have time to really do them. One is all through the neighborhood. I go walking with my wife at night. We do exercise or during the day, and there's so much stuff growing over the edges into the sidewalk. Sometimes more than half the sidewalk is blocked. I want to make a big automatic machine the guy could ride on, like a lawnmower, but it just trims all that stuff. Because they do have to trim it occasionally, especially on the public streets. And you'll see 5 guys there for 2 days. And I'm saying this shouldn't take more than about a half an hour, including collecting all the debris and stuff and tossing it into the truck. So, in my spare time, I think about it. Will I ever have time to pursue it? I don't know.
But then I have to say something because I'm a beekeeper. But you said debris. I thought you meant like flowers and so on, because it's always good to keep the wildflowers for the bees. We tend to just move them away and to have a straight or green lawn, and that's popular here as well. So I'll just put up a reminder that. Don't forget about the small bees because they are or the honeybees and the bumblebees, they are so important for us as well. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I forgot. If all the bees disappeared, how soon before all of us would die?
That's a kind. Yeah, it's stated that Einstein has said that after 3 years we would be gone. But it's a kind of it's a good. I mean, even if it's not exactly true, it's basically something like that. Basically every 3rd bite is from the bees, honeybees, bumblebees, and so on. So and even more than that, if you think about. Indirect effects into the livestock and so on. So yeah, that's super important. So I try to just remind people about that as much as I can, because even though I'm you know, super interested in bees, I also realize, and I think people realize, that we need to work together to because it's in our own interests, obviously. To
Do they just go for plants that have like small flowers on them? They don't go for tree leaves and stuff like that, do they?
They go, you know, you have clover, for example, and there are many blueberries, for example, apples. It's very popular. It's one of the most popular. The nectar from the flower from the apples, and almonds in California. More than 90% of all the almonds in California, in the world, comes from California. And there would be no almonds at all if you didn't take big trucks from all over United States with beehives and place them in California, because the wild bees and the many of the beehives that are kept there, they are dying, so they have to import them every year. So that's it's a side story, but so there are many things, of course, that that involves pollination from bees. So yeah, but that's another thing. But okay, if there's anything more you would like to add, otherwise.
One of the other things I was thinking about, you ever check out plenty.org, vertical farming?
I've read about it, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
they have a website, and they're little by little, and I'm saying in 10, 20 years, every big grocery store will have upstairs, boom, you'll get your best groceries, flavor, no transportation for 1,000 miles.
Locally grown and everything. Yeah, it's a super good idea.
I have some ideas how they could double their efficiency per square foot.
Yeah.
I don't even know who to talk to, and I'm too busy. It's so sad.
Maybe someone is watching this video and out there, who knows?
Look at this stuff and I say, oh, come on, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to get in touch with you or learn more about you, is there any way to contact you or send you a mail or read about your stuff?
Well, I have my website. Doug, the email is doug@inventordoug.com, and that's the website, inventordoug.com.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the descriptions below for people as well. So that's great. But thank you so much, Doug. This was a very interesting conversation. I learned a lot, and I hope people did as well. So thank you for joining the Evolution Show and for an inspiring conversation.
All right. We are having a lot of fun. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Tell us what you think and share your ideas in the comments below. And don't forget, if you liked the episode, give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps the show. And don't miss next week's episode when I'm back with part 2 of my conversation with Douglas Malewicki, when we talk about sustainable transport solutions, including bike highways, Tesla, and self-driving tech, and electric heavy trucks. So stay tuned, stay ahead of the curve, and stay electric, here on The Evolution Show.